investment banker with a Jewish wife, how many Jewish friends I have. And I just been in Moscow 6 weeks, and I spent.
No. No. Hello everyone. This video was originally planned as a reaction video where I'm just watching YouTube interviews from Danish politician Mads Palsvig. But I had to do a little bit more research and digging, and the whole thing has turned into a bit of a meditation on conspiracies and the function of conspiracies in political life. There seems to have been a large increase in the presence of conspiracies, both in cultural and political life, where it seems almost omnipresent now. And I looked at a study recently that said that it's actually not increased in terms of individual belief in conspiracies, but that the salience of them and the sort of mainstream acceptance of including it as a part of the culture and in media has become a lot more common. I think people are drawn to conspiracy theories for various reasons, as they serve different psychological and sociological purposes. Let's say, for example, that you have conspiracies that are based on fortifying in-groups against the out-groups. This is known as an enemy conspiracy in geopolitics, where you attribute conspiracies to the out-group and reasons for you to be that are reinforcing your view of them as the enemy that go beyond facts and in terms of what you can prove empirically. I could give you an examples of this. I have a family member who identifies as a Christian Democrat in sort of a European sense. It's sort of a political moderate. So it kind of has beliefs loosely based on Christian principles. So this individual is a informed person, baby boomer. He reads books, newspapers, and generally avoids conspiratainment media. But despite this, he shared with me a belief that he thinks the October 7th attack was coordinated between Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin, and that Benjamin Netanyahu gave the October the 7th attacks to Vladimir Putin as a sort of birthday gift in order to distract the public from the Russo-Ukrainian war and put the attention on the Israeli-Palestine conflict instead. And some of the evidence that he cited for this was the fact that Putin's birthday is on October the 7th. And I mean, it's not really convincing evidence. There's very few facts that points to this being true. But he believed this regardless, and it's sort of uncharacteristic of him to believe things that are completely counterfactual. But it makes sense if you look at it from the friend-enemy perspective, whereas he sees Russia and Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu as enemies, or generally unfavorable characters. And because of the lack of trust in those two characters, it's easy to attribute maliciousness and conspiracy to them that is simply not there to begin with. And the consequences for holding these beliefs are relatively benign, psychologically, sociologically. You will not be punished for believing this, and it will not introduce any difficulties into your life. The only thing you're doing is fortifying things that you already believe in and strengthening the resolve you have against the enemy group. The enemy conspiracies, it can be used for internal propaganda. It can be used for psychological warfare. This is something that you could, post about on Twitter to make people hate, Benjamin Netanyahu even more, for example. So it serves a lot of functions, and I think it's a very Lindy style of conspiracy. That you have factual reasons for thinking someone is the enemy, and you also have a certain fantastical, hyper-real reasons for thinking so. Another type of conspiracy that I think is benign and very common is the thrill-seeking or engagement conspiracies like UFOs, Bigfoot. It's the X-Files bro, I want to believe style conspiracies like crop circles, for example. This is relatively harmless, doesn't have a lot of political implications or consequences, and serves mostly an entertainment purpose. Then we're getting into territory that is more kind of psychologically difficult, say like partisan enemy conspiracies. I think this is something that describes the United States politics currently, where you have the QAnons and the BlueAnons, where you're in a two-party system, and both sides believe in conspiracies about the other side, that it does seem to reinforce their own resolve, but because it's in one country that they have to share together, it increases polarization, which can be sociologically and politically difficult to deal with, and difficult to roll back if the polarization increases. Even more complicated are the people who believe in sort of what I consider bipartisan or elite conspiracies, where you think that it's one elite that controls everything, and the elite is conspiring against you as an individual or as a group, where it becomes very difficult to, say, interact with institutions in any sane way because you're very paranoid about what's going to happen. Everything that you're doing, say from like medicine to food to information, everything has a sort of layer of skepticism toward it, and it goes from a sense of kind of maybe paranoid skepticism to just outright schizophrenia in certain cases that can be very self-destructive, and it's also socially destructive if enough people think this way. So if that's the kind of spectrum of the functional to the non-functional conspiracies, and the picture that I'm painting is that you have certain conspiracies that people who are functional believe in, and then you have some more dysfunctional, low-resource people who believe in the kind of crazier ones. Then there are the outliers, where you have relatively highly functional, highly educated people who seem to believe in the schizo-type conspiracies, which is difficult for me to fit into this mental model. An example of a person like this would be RFK Jr., where he has publicly claimed, for example, that the COVID vaccine is a type of bioweapon that's been engineered to target certain ethnic groups while sparing others. The specific claim is that he believes that the COVID vaccine was designed to protect Ashkenazi Jews and Han Chinese and then harm all the other populations. And if we set aside the factuality of this claim, I find it in a sense functionally and tactically puzzling if you are an established US politician who is a self-proclaimed friend and supporter of Israel, and you champion their rights of self-defense unquestionably, while at the same time you believe that the Israelis are concocting bioweapons to harm other ethnic groups. It really has the implication that you believe that your allies are plotting against you constantly, and even if you did believe this, why would you proclaim it publicly? So it's a bit of a nut. I really can't figure out exactly the motivation for doing this. I can't figure out why you would sit and say this, and given the fact that RFK Jr. is a highly educated person with degrees in law, environmental science, and economics, he comes from a well-established family and has a lot of credentials. It seems even stranger to be saying things like this. I can see how this is entertaining when you filter it through the sort of bro-servative, psychedelic lens of a Joe Rogan podcast. But I think in the sober reality of politics, it's actually quite concerning. RFK Jr. is not alone in this. There are other Western politicians on the conspiracy circuit, as I would like to call it, with similar high profiles, who I think make RFK Jr. seem very moderate by comparison. And this is the main topic of this video, Danish politician Mads Palsvig. So as a quick introduction, Palsvig is a Danish former investment banker who has transitioned into politics and activism. He has a master's degree in law and a bachelor's degree in finance. Throughout his finance career, he's worked with prominent institutional, financial institutions like the Credit Suisse, Barclays, Morgan Stanley, focusing primarily on trading government bonds and mortgages. In 2002, he started to read David Icke, and he became increasingly critical of the global financial system. His perspective deepened until in 2012 he was dismissed from his job and subsequently blacklisted from the financial industry. Palsvig believes himself that this is because of critical comments he made towards Janet Yellen, although the former employer has neither denied or confirmed this. After he departed, he had lost so much money that he had to move from his house and sell his cars and just move in with his family into sort of a cheap apartment. And since then, he has sort of been an organizer, a self-proclaimed whistleblower, a public speaker, who has started to talking more about the problems with the Western financial system. But it's gradually gone into more sort of hardcore conspiracy territory. So in 2018, he founded a political party named JFK21. It's an acronym for Jorden, Frihet and Kunskap, which means Earth, Freedom and Knowledge in English, translated from Danish. This party advocates for various things like financial reforms, national sovereignty, public awareness in terms of medical safety. So I think we could take a look at his party program and see exactly what he believes in. Okay, here we have the Danish Prosperity Party's policy page. It's split up into 31 objectives, translated by Google to make it easier for the viewer. So there might be something that's lost in translation here. Just prefacing, I mean, based on my experience with these kind of niche political parties in Scandinavia, especially those who are under, the parliamentary limit of votes, is that they fall into one of two groups, usually what I call, Scandinavian Ethiopianism, where their program is based on some almost kind of like some social policy that's completely outside of the Overton window, or it's way too idealistic in terms of the way politics practically work. So they basically end up saying that they want to leave every international agreement, from the EU to the UN to NATO to, pretty much everything. They just want to close themselves off to be a kind of self-sustained Ethiopia, North Korea, where that does all its own agriculture and has to maintain its own army. So it's kind of like just going back to 100, 200 years ago in a world that is more connected than it ever has been. And it's I think for most people it's a completely unrealistic option, and it's something that people don't want. They just want less immigration, and they get into looking at this platform and they realize that, screw this, right? It's not even interesting. The other version of it is the urbanification, and usually a lot of the Ethiopian isolationist policy is really just sort of a cover for urbanification, that they want to take their European country out of the Eurosphere. They don't want to be in the EU, they don't want to be in NATO, they actually want to be closer to Russia. So they take themselves out of these transatlantic agreements and want to get like a Russian security guarantee and have trade with Russia and the Asiatic countries. But they don't say that explicitly. It's a kind of taboo, especially with the Russia-Ukraine war going on. So it's sort of it's isolationism that is disguising Russophilia. That's my experience with this, and I think as we go through this program, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff. So you have 31 policy principles. The 9 first ones are related to financial reforms, and like with these things, if you want to succeed in politics, especially in Europe, you can have like one crazy idea in your party. If you have more than one idiosyncratic idea, you're basically going to be dismissed. But like with this party, it's like almost every single point is some kind of idiosyncratic thing that would create controversy. So it's kind of just completely taking itself out of the outside of the Overton window, outside of the allowable party line on every issue. So they'll never be taken seriously, but I think it's interesting just for study. So I mean, I think these principles are sort of ranked from probably least crazy, least controversial until kind of the most wacky as we go down. And the first ones are just relating to money. So let's see, point number 1, money creation, control and profit money creation back to the people. Brand case number 1, publicly owned national bank, economic policy. The state issues the country's money debt-free without interest. And he elaborates a bit more on this here. See, interest-free mortgage loans for primary residents. Banks and mortgage institutions issue mortgages and car loans at 0% interest to the people. People may not pay interest, but many receive interest from companies. Okay, so you can have, like, I guess, private banks or that do corporate loans. Companies are still free to choose how financial return is distributed between the investors as either variable dividend or potential price increases, a fixed dividend. So, okay, companies are untouched, private companies, in terms of compensation styles with stock the stock market and so on. But like for private individuals, you can't pay interest. Essentially, and I think a lot of this comes from this kind of anti-usury stance, right? Because if you see, like, looked at Ken O'Keefe for the greatest story ever told, you know, he takes a sort of hard line against Talmudic usury. But of course, when people are talking about usury, they usually mean exorbitant, excessive interest rate, like 15, 20, 25%. And debt traps. I mean, the way things work in Scandinavia is that you have usually low interest rates between like 2 and 5% for mortgages, and you can get like a fixed interest rate of 3%. It's not killing people, even though they are maxing out their loans. I mean, the first issue I see with this is if you're giving people 0% interest on car loans and mortgages, they're just going to max out all the time these interest-free loans, and they're going to be using it for everything else than cars and houses. You know, they'll use it for the cars and houses, and they'll keep taking up more loans, putting it into hedge funds, putting it into businesses. They'll be putting it into vacations, and saving no money at all. Like, what's the point of saving money if you can get interest-free loans from banks that are sort of state guaranteed? It sounds very risky, honestly, for the state to sit and take on a bunch of loans unless you have some very savvy program for how to filter out people. And if you're going to do that, then you're leaving that up to the state, which means, you know, more bureaucracy. So, which is something that he's very against. If you look at some of these other points, transfer income. See, throughout streamlining the bureaucratization of the transfer income area, this is a translation issue, it's a little bit hard to parse this. The citizen dividend from the money creation is paid on top of the current rates in the transfer area. The financial gains from streamlining of the transfer income area accrues 100% of the recipients of transfer income. The bureaucracy is enormous, the tangle of rules are even greater. The focus must be on simplification in the entire area. So I parse this as UBI, basically simplify bureaucracy and welfare state, and you get UBI instead. But of course, there's so many things in these political objectives that would actually demand more bureaucracy of the state, and actually more state employees, not less. So, housing as a human right. Housing for all Danes is a human right to have a place to live. The state, municipality, parish makes reasonable accommodations available if necessary. So I don't know how extensive this is. I think the homelessness in Denmark, it's about like 2,000 people who are registered as being homeless. It's not very big in a population of maybe about 6 million. So I don't know if this is an actual issue, and especially if you're giving people loans for buying homes at 0% interest. I don't know why that shouldn't be enough to solve the home ownership problem. But I guess, you know, there's more details in terms of how much accommodation you're expected to have and how much you're guaranteed. But it seems to be. I don't know if it's really necessary. At least I think you could have the market sort that out if you're giving people, you know, low interest rates. You don't need more, you know, to build more government housing. Digital transaction taxes as a tool to effectively improve the national economy. Let's see, the point number 5, it says corporation tax is replaced by 1% tax on digital money transactions. Transaction tax 1% on all digital money transactions in and out of Danish bank accounts replaces the corporation tax. So I guess you have in Scandinavia a typical corporation tax of 25% or 30 or something, and that's supposed to be replaced with a transactional tax. I guess that would be good for smaller companies, but if you have a very high transactional volume, then it's not good. So I guess it punishes some type of companies and favors others. I'm not exactly sure about the math on this, so OMS replaces VAT, VAT, simplification and streamlining of money transactions. VAT is reintroduced, replaces VAT. This minimizes the administration in incoming and outgoing VAT, OMS. I'm not exactly sure the specifics of the financials here, so I'll just keep going. Income tax is being phased out, an efficient and fair financial system. Instead, the labor market contribution increases effectively 33% of incomes over 120,000 Danish kroner as the basic deduction for labor market contribution is introduced and set at 120,000. Thus, 0% is paid in tax in the first 130,000 you earn. The value of personal deductions disappears and all people get a marginal tax rate of 33%. It is the aim of the labor market contribution must be removed completely in line with the improvements of public finances. So he's talking a lot about this, the human potentials and improving public finances, but so far it's only been cutting. So I don't know where these extra revenues are going to come from, if the transactional tax is going to ensure that they have a net positive revenue that is enough to cut income tax. Because the Danish income tax is quite formidable, right? So compensating for that will be, you need a lot of money coming in. Okay, where are you getting from? And he wants to remove property tax as well. So you can't use property tax to compensate. Zero property tax on one's primary residence to begin with, up to 1 million Danish kroner per adult citizen. As the surplus in the state grows, the property taxes on real estate up to the value of 1 million Danish kroner per person over 18 will be removed. Okay, so yeah, even less government revenue then. Green taxes on electricity and water will be halved. Customers do not have to bear the tax burden alone. It must be shared with the companies, but the companies just push it to the consumer anyway, so I don't exactly know how that's going to work. Yeah, we're cutting more government revenue. Decentralization. Decisions must be made as close as possible to the citizens themselves. Number of regions or counties must be increased to 20. The number of municipalities increased to 300. Municipalities are divided into local units with a total of 1,756 local councils, which must have independent financial responsibility and thus contribute actively to society's operations. All decisions are made as local as possible. Yeah, to me this sounds very counterintuitive. I know that the population density in Denmark, it's concentrated around a few urban areas. I think as many as 90% of Danes live in small urban centers, and splitting up municipalities even more, it seems suboptimal in terms of saving money. Because this is a general thing in Scandinavia, whether you're looking at Norway or Sweden or Denmark, is that you have low population density and many municipalities that is spread out, and the trend is towards urbanization, right? People are moving away from the small districts into the cities, and a lot of these smaller municipalities are almost becoming completely desolate, so they're being smashed together to make it more efficient. So I mean, with this stuff, you're essentially just going in the opposite direction. You're not scaling things up, you're sort of scaling it down. But the population trend seems to be going in the opposite direction, so I don't see the value. I'm not exactly sure, why this particular number of local councils or what is supposed to be achieved doing this, other than making things less efficient, not more efficient. 11 qualification requirements are introduced in Denmark. Danish citizens are always entitled to an impartial assessment of a case. If a citizen wishes to complain about a service received from a public or private company, the complaint will in the future be assessed by a body which is not incompetent. I hope that's in the laws already. The body in question must have a majority of its members from sectors other than the one being complained about. This task could be handled by a jury appointee by a citizen's ombudsman. Members of lodges cannot sit on a grievance board, since they must swear allegiance to the lodge, so by definition they are always ineligible. Okay, so this is more bureaucracy. I mean, this sounds really good that everybody should be able to complain about anything and have every case heard, but this the cost of bureaucracy of getting people to actually do this, because they have to work and they have to sit and process all of these complaints, and if everybody should have the right to do this at all times, well, it's just more work. And so far it's only cutting revenue in. and descaling so that you have less people to work with. So okay, where are we getting it from? It's like it's just kind of assumed here that there's what do they call this kind of prosperity mindset, the abundance mindset thing, that if we just implement these laws and we remove interest rates, then the economy is just going to explode with productivity, so we'll just have all these people available to us. I think it's wishful thinking. 12 lying politicians are excluded. See, politicians must be held accountable for what they have promised to the people. Politicians who vote exactly against what they have promised during the election campaign can be excluded from the parliament and be fined. Politicians may not use private emails in an official capacity. Businesses are prohibited from any form of lobbying. Democracy is only for the people. So the email thing is kind of interesting. I don't know the implications of it. It might affect some of the dynamism of politics, but it would be interesting to have insight into public emails. Of course, if you're going to extend this kind of right to complain about everything, then they'll never get anything done ever. In terms of holding politicians accountable, I think that if he was voted in on all of these policies and tried to implement them and realized that they just weren't going to work, then he would not qualify for this himself. He would probably just be excluded. I think, most politicians who would end up having to buckle to pragmatism would be excluded on this account. So it really is a way of making things kind of less flexible. I can see, it's easier to understand like anti-corruption laws, for example, like Singapore, where they have very strict punishment for corruption among politicians. But if you have to just look at, okay, they promised something on a campaign and they had to make a compromise or something, and then you have to exclude or fine them. It makes the system incredibly inflexible. Lodge memberships prohibited for politicians. Persons who place special interest above their duties cannot hold public positions. Members of lodges is prohibited to all members of parliament, leading staff, administrations, and all council, all employees of the police and the military. In addition, no lodges must have permanent seat in the UN. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not exactly sure what this is referring to, but this is like the Illuminati clause, right? Because he's talking about like Freemasons, Rothschilds, Talmud followers, so this kind of Sharia, all of these special groups that he just wants to exclude from politics. But of course, it's I don't know. This might make it difficult depending on the details of this. I can sort of see this one, and I don't know if he has one for dual citizenship as well, or what the situation is in Denmark in terms of being a politician running for office. If you have a dual citizenship, that might be more helpful. But I think it will be difficult to find people if you're going to exclude. You have to exclude them from all kind of like fraternity organizations. If they're going to have, like, if you're going to be a police officer, for example, and you can't be in a fraternity or something, it makes things difficult. Okay, now we're getting into even more weird points. 14, no to war. It's just no war policy, period. The Danish armed forces must only exercise defense. Denmark cannot participate in wars unless a majority of the population has decided in a referendum, plus subsequently approved by a majority of the UN. Denmark can, of course, defend against direct attack. Anyone who votes to attack another country is making themselves available for military service. So, I mean, this is more or less a kind of covert way of saying that they should leave NATO, right? Because they're currently, Denmark is a NATO country. They have a small and specialized military that they make available to NATO for NATO missions. And in turn, they get a defense guarantee from a larger country, meaning they can spend less money on the military and more money on welfare, for example, or other government projects. But if this is to be taken seriously, then okay, they have to leave NATO and have to be responsible for their own army that is big enough to defend Denmark against a similar or even larger opponent, which would be a considerable increase in defense expenditures. And that's what I thought when I talk about like Ethiopian politics or North Korean politics. This is what I'm talking about here. It's that we're getting into agriculture as well, but he's basically saying that okay, you can't use defensive alliances, and you can't use you can't outsource things to free trade agreements. So you have to do everything yourself. and that just makes things harder economically. You have to just it takes up all of the employers basically either into defense or food production, and you go back to like this kind of state where that they were in 200 to 300 years ago. 15, false flags are prohibited. Our Western democracy must value truthfulness and must not use propaganda. Minimum prison sentence for anyone who participates in false flag. I don't know why he's using quotation marks here, but operations a la Operation Northwoods or Operation Gladio. The government instructs the army never to use false flag operations. The use of agent provocateurs is strictly prohibited. All governments and secret intelligence agencies. Again, this is a problem because if he wants Denmark to go out of NATO and they have to have their own military to defend themselves, and they're not a part of any international organizations, it becomes like a sort of prisoner's dilemma almost, because other countries could be using false flags against Denmark, but they're not allowed to use these techniques. They can't go on the offensive unless they have a full vote on the UN approval, and they can't use a false flag ever, or try to use propaganda ever. So they're really at a disadvantage. I think this is just making Denmark a kind of sitting duck. I think internationally, like these types of points is something you should introduce on a global level. This is something the UN should have, or you should have talk about it in larger alliances to make sure that every country follows this and is not using false flags. If it's only one country doing it, if it's some kind of isolationist thing, it's a very bad combination, I think, of global idealism and isolationism. That if you are isolationist, you basically do what you have to survive, and you don't sit in moral fag. 16, loans from the IMF and the World Bank are made interest-free. Denmark does not control the IMF. This is totally irrelevant. End the free trade agreements. So-called free trade agreements are not free and must therefore be rejected. There must be an end to free trade agreements that simply give more money, power to multinational corporations. Denmark cannot enter into international free trade agreements, which give foreign rights to invalidate Danish law without constitutional amendment or referendum with a qualified majority. It should be more difficult to take out the patent. It's being investigated whether it should be required that the patent is used, otherwise it will be revoked. So, this seems to be two different things, like patent law and trade agreements, but I guess this, because they're already in free trade agreements through the EU, so it's kind of an implicit we're leaving the EU. Point 18, compulsory liquidation of companies that commit crimes against humanity, increased ethical oversight of companies operating in fields with a particular conflict of interest, law enforced dissolutions of companies that commit crimes against humanity is introduced. This can be gross pollution cases, starting wars with economic gains in mind. All companies must be held responsible if they do not comply with good business practice. It must be possible to send responsibility to a parent company outside of Denmark, thus the responsible person in the Danish subsidiary is punished. So, I mean, considering this comes from a very conspiracy-brained point of view, this is like Pfizer or stuff like that, like vaccine companies that he actually wants to punish the local chapter of Pfizer in Denmark. I guess that's what's behind a lot of this thinking. In terms of practicality, I mean, you already have international law regulating corporate conduct, but I guess he wants something that's even stricter for Denmark. Which of course you do risk, but I mean, starting wars, I don't know what he's thinking about in terms of corporations. Like this is the British East India Company or something. It seems slightly out of touch. 19, the EU is governed by a non-elected commission. Denmark must not participate in an undemocratic supranational economic association. The EU is not democratic, but governed by a commission, therefore we won't Daxit. Okay, so this is more of explicitly stated what was mentioned previously with the free trade agreements. Now it's just saying explicitly, no, we're not going to be in the EU, so we're leaving because it's not democratic. I mean, with other smaller parties that have these party programs, they usually just say that they don't want the EU because they want more sovereignty for themselves. not because it's like democratic or something. They just want to be free to make their own decisions, and they feel like the deal they're getting is a net negative. But here it's like it's coated in this idealistic language, which is it's a little bit difficult for me to understand why. Voting machines are prohibited. Democracy is ensured by legitimate elections free from mechanical manipulation. Voting machines are banned. In democratic elections, only paper ballots are accepted unless there is a solution where blockchain technology is used, and it ensures full anonymity of the voter. All elections should be checked by international independent organizations. The NGOs. Well, yeah, I mean, he's really anti-NGO on his Twitter anyway. But and I guess if they get involved and he gets results he doesn't like, then he'll just blame them for that. But I mean, Denmark currently uses only paper ballots, so I'm not sure what this is even supposed to address. Maybe he's hung up on like the 2020 Trump election narratives with like the Hugo Chavez voting machines and the Sidley Powell Kraken stuff. That he's, we need to solve that. We need to solve it with blockchains. But I mean, Scandinavia has digital ID, right? So you could use that very simply to implement digital solutions for voting that would ensure authenticity, and you could also anonymize the results using it. So this is sort of a non-issue in my view. It seems to only be included with this kind of Dominion machine conspiracies in mind. Health. Natural medicine is again equated with conventional medicine and pharmaceuticals. In addition to patentable synthetic medicine, the universities must also educate in natural unpatentable medicine and healing or effects of a healthy diet. Okay, so this is like Africanization, basically. You're saying that like Asian, acupuncture or homeopathy is kind of the same as Western scholastic medicine. So yeah, we're back with the crystal healing women and the incense. 5G must never be introduced in Denmark as it is extremely dangerous to health. Well, it's already been introduced. I'm not sure they've had any very adverse health effects. I think you would have heard of it by now. And then there's a statement about vaccines having to have like product declarations and these various things that makes it harder to send out vaccines. This is like the RFK Jr. stuff, but it's probably even more extreme. I don't think RFK Jr. is that hard on like natural medicine and homeopathy. Agricultural policy. Agriculture must be 100% state-controlled organic. All pesticides are prohibited. Agriculture must be 100% GMO-free, including animal-fed, preferably biodynamic. We are working towards increased focus on restoring ecosystems, including permaculture. Farming that breaks down the topsoil humus layer is closed down. So yeah, you have to make all the food yourself, and you can't use pesticides. You can't use GMOs. Like you can't use technology that makes it more efficient, essentially. So you have to go back to old-style farming, the way that we used to. That's just so much less efficient, and it takes much more manpower. So it will make everybody poorer, but it's just a kind of assuming that if you go back to this old style, that pesticides is screwing everybody up. So if you remove the pesticides, you're going to have this boom in health, and that's going to translate into more economic production in other areas, which I seriously doubt. This is just taking you back to, I mean, this is like Africanization. Environmental policy. Companies that pollute must continuously set aside adequate amounts to cover estimated cost of the cleanup. In particular serious cases, companies can be compulsory dissolved. I think you already have laws for this. Easy access for states to seek compensation from owners of companies that pollute. For example, 160,000 mines in the United States are waiting to be cleaned out because owners have emptied the companies that own the mines. But the value did not allocate adequate amounts for cleanup. Okay, I mean, so much of this is very United States focused. It's like he's not even living in Denmark at all. Education policy, folkeskole, where 3-year groups are merged into larger home areas with approximately 80 students and thus a minimum of 5 to 8 teachers with large common rooms, kitchens, and teaching and eco-gardening for students. There's currently 1 teacher per 10 pupils. So he wants more teachers for less pupils, basically. So you have to maybe not double the amount of teachers, but at least significantly increase the amount of teachers. But where are you going to take them from? You need more people in defense. You need more people in agriculture. You need more people as municipal workers. You need more people to work as bureaucrats in these agencies that sort of oversee other agencies and this kind of making complaints for public servants. So I think Denmark has a relatively low unemployment already. So I'm not sure where you're going to get all the teachers from. Media policy. Stop the lies of the mainstream media. Public service obligations must be understood literally. In the future, the media must not lie. The media lie by mistake. It must be retracted to the same extent as the lie was spread. When the mainstream media lies, including spreading lies that lead to war on false basis, so-called war propaganda, it costs millions of lives. It's interesting that he doesn't include alternative media here, or social media or something. It's only the mainstream media, which are already more regulated, by the way. Like especially in Scandinavia, the standards for being a newspaper or being able to operate that way is a lot more strict than what he is doing, where he's just sitting on a Twitter account, just posting anything he finds on Facebook, or like resharing any crazy conspiracy that he finds. So if he were subjected to this level of scrutiny, it would never hold up. He would just be shut down immediately himself. Energy policy. Investments into renewable energy are supplemented by investment into research and any other forms of energy, algae, hydrogen, thorium, photosynthesis as examples, and combinations of the forms. There should be much more research into alternative forms of energy and renewable energy. The results should be made available to humanity. Yeah, that sounds good. I just don't know where you get the resources from if you have so many people who have to work in agriculture and defense. Police 27. The police will be decentralized so that there will be one police station in each municipality, at least one police officer allocated to each parish local council. In addition, we also believe that it's important for a judicial initiative to increase the penalty framework for all forms of violent crime, and there must be an independent body that assesses whether the police investigate violent crime to a sufficient extent. So more cops and bureaucracy that oversee cops. Right? Again, where are you getting the people from? Religion is a private matter. The state is secular. Denmark cannot be ruled by religion in any way. This rule applies to politicians, judges, and senior officials in public sectors. It seems to contradict his views that he espouses on Twitter, which is that Denmark is a Christian country. He's always talking about the Christian countries that were subjected to the world wars by the Talmudists and the Loxists, who they gave us the vaccine genocide, only Christian nations. So it's very flimsily how he applies this dichotomy between secular and Christian, and who's within like the Christian identity. Maybe he wrote this before he jumped on the Candace Owens talking points. But it seems very consistent. I mean, in terms of reality, Denmark is one of the most secular states. It's already a secular state, the way that it is now, so it's not changing much. It doesn't seem to be a particularly necessary point, but I assume when I looked at this kind of read more, listen, he tries to sort of, it's more about safeguarding against Sharia and Talmudists and all of these other groups. Food policy. Denmark opts out of all international agreements that bind us to accept the standards for food quality drawn up by Switzerland and the code Alimentarius. So instead of the Danish Ministry of Food, the cooperation with Folketing and the population must decide which food standards we can accept. If other countries want to join the elected code Alimentarius Council with elected representatives who only have publicly accessible meetings and full access to documents, then the Prosperity Party can join such a council. So yeah, they can't just use the EU food standards. They have to reinvent the wheel and create their own democratically approved food standards, which I assume, given my prognosis reading this party program, how much poorer Denmark is going to become. It's the food standards will just have to be forced to be a lot worse because they won't have the resources to do all of this stuff on their own. Planned obsolescence, point number 30, planned obsolescence and planned obsolescence of product is prohibited. punished by a fine or imposed heavy import duties. So yeah, this sounds great actually, but the devil's in the details. I don't know exactly how you diagnose a product as being a planned obsolescence product. Does that mean you can't use cheap materials, for example, or so? Yeah, it sounds good. It just gets a little difficult when you get into the details, and this can also become a huge limiting factor on the economy in general, stopping people from making cheaply available stuff. Immigration policy. Okay, family reunification. Spouses must in the future have easier access to Denmark than the immigrants that George Soros, Angela Merkel, and Helene Thorning sail in shuttles across the Mediterranean. Okay, so he wants easier family reunification in Denmark, but not if it's from like George Soros immigrants, basically. First of all, it must be recognized that the war on terror, or what is the war on Islam, which has been started on the basis of several lies, should be stopped immediately. There are now between 70 and 80 million refugees worldwide. Half have come since the war on terror started 15 years ago. War criminals must go before the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Compensations must be paid to the states we have bombed without reason. I think the war on terror is already over. You should probably update the party program. Most of this is not even immigration policy. This is foreign policy in general, and stuff that is related to international organs and transatlantic organizations. I mean, there's very little here about actual legal immigration versus asylum seekers, and how exactly these things should be handled. It's really just kind of like grievances about the war on terror and they bombed Libya. We have to send money to Libya. The poor Gaddafi. This almost like a third worldist sentiment in here. And he also wants to make immigration easier. This should have been like a no-brainer. Just say that you want low immigration, right? It would have been so easy, but he has to have like this, just make it about his irritations about the global American empire or something in here, and how you should send money to Iraq and Libya. So yeah, just a general loser. Total loser program. I mean, it can only lead to sort of Africanization, making Denmark poorer, making it less easy to defend. It's easier to attack, more vulnerable, and it's very hard to tell who exactly this is going to appeal to. Like, who would look at this program and just think that, oh yeah, I want this, Maybe you find some things here that you think are interesting, but it's just every single point just comes across as wacky almost. So, but not untypical from what you find with these Scandinavian micro parties. So anyway, let's take a look at his Twitter history. Okay, here is Mads Palsvig's Twitter profile. We have the profile picture. He has a very proper Danish statesman-like physiognomy. This is a trustworthy physiognomy, which makes it even more jarring to read all the incoherent nonsense that he's writing. The background picture is Israel and Palestine, which has been one of his favorite topics to talk about, especially the last year. So he created this account in 2013, relatively inactive. I was able to scrape his entire Twitter record to sort of see the patterns of his posting and how it has developed over the years. So in 2017, he posted about 1,600 tweets. It's mostly in Danish, related to organizing activity and event planning. In 2018, he posted roughly 1,000 tweets, mostly linking to his Facebook page. About another 1,000 in 2019, and then in 2022 and 2021, he hardly posted about 100 tweets a year. It's very inactive on the platform. So then after Elon Musk takes over in October 2022, he comes back on Twitter and starts posting explosively, really in a way that goes up exponentially. So in 2023, he posts about 2,000 times, and in 2024 so far, he's almost posted 6,000 tweets. The sort of pattern is that he's posting to an English-speaking audience now, and he's gained quite a substantial following. Let's see where he's up to. He has almost 40,000 followers. So the after Elon takes over, he starts posting, to his audience. It's a lot of sort of QAnon posting. He talks a lot about satanic pedophiles, Khazarian mafia, Rothschilds, World Economic Forum, and Soros, of course. But after October the 7th in 2023, he is starting to have another identifier for them. And this is the Talmudist and the Loxist meme. So I think he read some Talmud quotes on 4chan, and a lot of his rhetoric has then been based off that. If I'm going through his, you can go through the sheet here, and we can search for, if you search for Talmud. Sorry, no, I was wrong. It was Talmud. Like this, he has posted the word Talmud about 1,267 times, and all of that is within 2024. So it's a sort of very recent obsession to talk about the Talmudic. Here you can see the Talmudic. See, I'm just going to read it like I'm him. Like, the Loxists want to kill beautiful young men like this wonderful young man. Time to separate synagogue from state. Time to stop the Talmudic world order. Imagine living in a Talmudic world order. And then he goes, at real Donald Trump, oh, don't give up just yet. People will rise, and it will hopefully for the Talmudic followers, be a Christian and Muslim people who don't believe in collective punishment who will be in charge. And he says, why do Democrats always talk about taking the weapons from the good and normal people, but never talk about stopping child trafficking? Why do the Democrats promote transgenderism and will never fight against pedophilia? Because we live in a Talmudic world order, and the Talmud condones pedophilia. Not my words, it's in the Talmud. Separate synagogue from state. And yeah, this is very consistent. It's like multiple times per day. It's the same thing. Keep truth bombing the normies and tell them about the Loxist, Talmudist, Holocaust. 85% of the Biden administration is Jewish. 9/11 dancing Israelis. Documented event, Hotel King David, USS Liberty, Live On affair. He's sort of overdosing on JQ stuff, which was sort of slightly present there. He would talk about the Rothschilds elites and the Khazarian mafia, before this, but it's like this monomaniacal focus on Talmudic Jews, essentially, and this meme around that has been a lot more present in like the last year. So I was listening to one of his Twitter spaces, and he claimed that it's from like his Iranian son-in-law. He has quite a mixed family, so it's interesting how he falls into that stuff. I mean, the Talmudist meme, in a sense, it's a bit like the Khazarian Jews meme, in a sense, where it's like it's the Jews, but not really the Jews. In a sense, the same way that Candace Owens is doing this, where they're kind of going there, but they're not really. And it's the Jews that are the problem, but only the percentage of the Jews that are these Loxist types, or these Talmudic followers. Even though most of the people that he cites as examples of Talmudists are very secular Jews, who have probably never opened the Talmud in their life, as most Jews have not. The actual Talmud is a sort of very large, complicated document that most Jews never touch. I mean, most of them are secular anyways, and quite intermixed as opposed to what he's actually talking about in most of his tweets. See, there's so many weird tweet patterns that he has, like these ones, for example, where he's tagging former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev and Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy. Like, in this tweet here, he's basically putting on a CC. This is like carbon copy in an email. And he's always tagging Medvedev, Trump, and RFK Jr. So the genocidal Jewish Bolshevik had 60 million reasons to frame the Germans for what they had done to the white Orthodox Christians and Muslim Russians, Ukrainians, Georgians, and Kazakhs and other ethnicities. Yes, 60 million. So he's quite a fan of this kind of like pro-Russian narrative, the Russian view of the Second World War. It's like they're the real victims of what happens, and it's really like the Jews that are attacking Russia and genociding Muslim Russians or whatever. So yeah, I think you've seen this pattern before. He's also in on that club where the people who were saying that Trump is like on Team Israel, but then he changes and says that Trump is actually against the Jews, and then Trump is a part of the cabal, but then he's against the cabal. Here he's saying it's remarkable how Muslims support Trump. Trump is sucking up to Israel at the crying wall and even celebrating the Talmud following Shabbat Ludovica Rebbe Schneerson, while Israel is genociding tens and thousands of Muslims. Please ask yourself, why hasn't a single Muslim country except for Yemen been supporting Palestinians? While they are being slaughtered, starved, and tortured and genocided, my take, the Talmud following Jews, aka the Deep State, aka KH4C, a mafia that has made a deal with the Arab world. Jews get the greater Israel, but Arabs get Europe. That's the deal. That's the reason why Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and all the other Muslim countries don't support the Palestinians. That's why they even prohibit their own population from showing any kind of support for the Palestinians in the streets. And you look at his website and the policies, and there's some interesting economic policies there, but this is never talked about on his Twitter timeline at all, or his social media presence. It's just all this kind of conspiratorial goop. I'll show you the other one in case you doubted me about the flood stuff. Let's see here, Kamala is touching the Talmud. What is going on? So here he's being quote tweeted. It says Spain cancels the weapons deal with mass murdering Israel, and shortly after, a coincidence of a HAARP weather weapon every single time.
María, la furgoneta baja por ahí. Mira, la tenemos librado.
So it's flooding that's going on in Spain, and his interpretation is that because this coincided with Spain cancelling weapons deals with Israel, then that means that the Israelis are using weather weapons to attack Spain. And some guy comments in this thread, well, what about Norway, right? Because Norway hasn't experienced anything, and Norway's also been quite critical of Israel and try to boycott them. So his answer to that is, let's just see if I can find it. Mads. Pretty synagogue here, yeah. He says Utoya happened when Norway wanted to support Palestinians. See Ole Damengård's documentary on Utoya. So he basically claims that Anders Behring Breivik was like an Israeli agent doing a false flag to punish Norwegians for supporting Palestinians, and that Ole Damengård's documentary proves this, which TLDR, it kind of doesn't. But it's an interesting take. I know that Breivik was pro-Israel and Zionist, like most Norwegian right-wingers, but I've just seen no compelling evidence that he was doing this in connection with Israel or anything like this. So maybe I want to show you a couple of his interviews because they're quite interesting. Okay, so now we are looking at an interview between David Curtin and Mads Palsvig. So these two apparently know each other from one of these conspiracy conferences. Curtin is the leader of the British Heritage Party, which also seems to be very much a one-man affair. So let's see if they can get some interesting insights about Mr. Palsvig from this interview.
Mads Palsvig, a friend of the show, is back with me today. Mads is the leader of the Prosperity Party in Denmark, and he is outspoken about social issues and things that are going on at the moment which affect our nations here in the West. Mads, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure.
No, really good to see you again. And one thing that I've noticed you've started speaking about, which I've never heard of before, I learned from you, is there's this word loxism, which is a kind of racism that is kind of hidden from most people. Can you tell us what is loxism and why have you started speaking about it?
So Marxism is very, very important to understand what is going on right now. I believe we have a Talmudic world order,
Talmudic world order.
which means that we are run by people, and I'm not talking about all Jews here. I'm not talking about my wife, and I'm not talking
Huh? Your Jewish wife? Okay, go on.
about her family and all my Jewish friends. You can imagine
Your Jewish friends?
being an investment banker with a Jewish wife, how many Jewish friends I have. And I just been in Moscow 6 weeks, and I spent
No. Oh, say it isn't so, Mats.
evenings and holidays with my Jewish friends. Marxism is the Talmudic world order. You say the Biden administration, 85% are Jewish of the senior positions there. I mean, they are 2.6% of the population. So there is certainly something going on here, and in the Talmud, it is explained that there is a legal system. It's in the Talmud. It's not my words. It's in the Talmud, one of the Jewish religious books, that a Jew should always win a court case. Not my words. It's in the Talmud. And the Goy, that would be you and me, we should always lose. And when you see the court cases of Hillary Clinton, for example, she gets 145 million dollars from Russia for signing up the sale of 20% of America's uranium, and then Trump is falsely accused of Russian collusion. No proof whatsoever. This is an example of this Talmudic legal system. Marxism is.
I mean, there's a lot to go through there, but if you want to know why, like, I think his brain is just so completely melted. Okay, Hillary Clinton and what he's referencing there is what's called the Uranium One scandal, and it's actually quite complicated. Hillary Clinton was in the State Department, and she was also active in the Clinton Foundation with her husband Bill. There was a Canadian company that wanted to sell uranium to Russia at the time. That Canadian company needed the approval of the State Department, which Hillary Clinton was the leader of at the time. And this was at that time, or really sort of in that same time frame, there was a donation from the person who owned that Canadian company to the Clinton Foundation. So people made the connection that he was making that donation to Hillary Clinton, to the Clinton Foundation, in order to bribe Hillary so that she would approve the sale. And there was an investigation made into that, where the conclusion of that investigation is that she wasn't blamed for it because there was somebody else who approved it that worked in the State Department and not her directly. So they weren't able to find, or at least from that examination, where they weren't able to find any conclusive proof. But the point he was trying to make here, in spite of like the sort of the misrepresentation of that case, is that okay, so Hillary Clinton is then selling, uranium to the Russians, and nothing happens. But Donald Trump is accused of Russian collusion, and this was like with the Russian investigation and the Mueller report, which of course it was not evidence free as he tries to present. There's a lot in that in terms of people involved in the in the Trump campaign, like Roger Stone and Paul Manafort and so on, who were indicted because of connections to Russia. So there's a lot to go on there. But Trump was not found guilty, and Hillary was not found guilty. So he's saying here that okay, the Goyim should always lose, the Jews should always win. So here we have two Goyims. We have Hillary and Trump. Both of them are arguably Shabbos Goys. They're friends of Israel. Both of them are examined, and they were found not guilty. So what point is he trying to make? They were not losing those cases. They won the cases. I mean, it's sort of a completely moot point. He's just sort of listing off talking points as like he's just sitting and overdosing, just reading every conspiracy post that he finds on these kind of message boards and just listing them off, and it's kind of building this kind of Lego block worldview out of it. Like, I wish that this was the exception, but if you just sit and listen to his interviews, this is how he thinks. It's just kind of like this incoherent patchwork of conspiracy ideas. But let's hear a little bit more.
Explicit, verbal or in documents, expression and a wish to exterminate non-Jewish people. That's a Loxist. So the Loxist would be the rare case, because most Jews are not like that. I want to clarify. I don't know any Loxists, and I know hundreds of Jews. But in the rare case, let's just like...
Yeah, so this is the interesting part. Like, his wife is Jewish. He's intermarried. Like, his kids are ethnically Jewish, and he has Jewish friends, apparently, like Russian banker Jews that he meets on occasion. I wonder what they're talking about. If the only thing, this guy's completely conspiracy brain, that he's only talking about, the Talmudic world order and how we need to separate the synagogue from the state, how exactly their social dynamics work. I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to be able to, if he has any friends left at that point. But so he knows hundreds of Jews, and none of them are these Loxists or whatever he's talking about. And he barely is able to name any Loxists. Like, he's talking about the Biden admin. Most of the Biden Jews are Biden admin Jews are secular Jews. They're not Loxists. They're sort of Talmudic Orthodox Jews in any sense. So it's just a completely moot point. What the fuck does it have to do with anything?
You have some white crazy supremacists. We fantasize who they are. They might be some hillbilly, with unwashed hair, sitting out in the Midwest somewhere, saying all the black people, all the Jewish people are horrible, and so on. But they do not run the printing press. They don't own the mainstream media. They're not CEOs of big pharma who just committed one of the biggest crimes in human history with the COVID scam, where they claimed the annual flu was a dangerous virus. Total fraud. And so we do need to talk about this word, the Loxism. We need to talk about it, and I can document so much. You can.
Well, he does also believe that the vax was like a genocide attempt. Like, this is even harder than the Kennedy RFK hypothesis. He actually believes that, like, Israel started this thing to like genocide every non-Jewish nation. Like, 80% of the Christian nations were given the needle or whatever, and the Israelis got the placebo. So, well, yeah, apparently, maybe Netanyahu is a Loxist or whatever. But
just see right now in Gaza, hundreds of leading politicians, scholars, even religious leaders, rabbis, outspokenly talking about their wish to exterminate all Amalek, and that would be in this case the Palestinians, or as a minimum ethnically cleanse them. So you do have Loxism. You have 4 famous examples. That's the Henry Morgenthau plan from September 1944, which was to exterminate all Germans, or at least 20%, which is what they did from 1945 to 1948. It was based on a book written by Theodor.
Well, yeah, actually, the Morgenthau plan would probably be a lot better example of if you're going to create some kind of archetypal Loxist or some person with general animus against especially ethnic Germans. This is actually a lot better than the Hillary Clinton Iranian-1 scandal.
Kaufman called Germany Must Perish. It came out, I think it was January or 41 or December 1940. And Louis Nieser's book, What to Do with Germany. And then you have the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan. He was only half Jewish. His mother was Austrian Jew. His father was Japanese. The Coudenhove-Kalergi plan, which in his Praktischer Idealmus writes that should run Europe, and it's very fitting that the EU flag has 12 stars, which is symbolizing the 12 Jewish tribes. One of them.
This is bullshit. Oh, it's so fucking stupid.
Is the Levi tribe, which happens to be Moses, Mark's, and my wife's family's name. So this means that the Jews should. He writes it. It's totally clear. He writes it that we should be mixed race. You can't tell from me, but I'm also. I'm the only blonde in my family in 3 generations. but so be it. And my kids are mixed race. My wife is Jewish. So my kids are immigrants. So I am living up to the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan because I'm mixed race, and that is what we should do. We should mix, except the Jews.
I mean, the Kalergi plan, I'm actually not sure if he was even half Jewish. He was writing on pan-Europeanism and trying to create some kind of pan-European race, pan-European identity. I know that he married a Jewess, but I'm not exactly sure if he was ethnically Jewish himself.
Jews should not mix. And we can see this in Israel as well. They allow zero immigration. And it's even worse. They're even discriminating Sephardic Jews. They're discriminating black Jews from Ethiopia.
I mean, the idea that, like, he's presenting this view where, okay, the Jews shouldn't mix, but the Jews are some of the most mixed people in the world. I mean, like, his wife married him, and they're mixing right now. Secular Jews are, you know, they're out. Essentially, like, their rate of miscegenation is probably higher than I think any other ethnic group. So they're not doing a very good job if they're, you know, following this plan of, like, mixing everybody else but remaining pure. This is absolutely not happening. I mean, it may be within, like, these most Orthodox Hasidic communities, but certainly not in the secular Jews or the types of Jews who, well, let's say, like the Kalergi plan or the people that he is bringing up.
Throwing them out. They are so racist against black Jews. It's unreal. And
so yeah, poor black Jews, right? Though it's sort of the he has this sort of anti-racist third worldist instinct as well. Like, if it wasn't, if the stuff he was saying wasn't bad enough already, he'll occasionally bring up this kind of poor black man stuff and mix it in there. It's just the worst of every world.
So I'm being too fair on Israel when I'm saying they have zero immigration. They also have an apartheid system where they are buying up Palestinian land, and then they're giving it to Jewish people. They're trying, whenever a Jew wants to sell it, he cannot sell it to a Palestinian. I'm not making this up. You can read Israel Shahak's book, Jewish History, Jewish Religion. He is a former member of the Knesset. He explains in perfect details the deeply unfair apartheid state's legal system in Israel. And that is the Talmudic world order we're living in now. I have a master's degree in law, and I couldn't understand why are court cases often so random. And now I'm beginning to understand if you are in the club, either you're a good goyim or you're Jewish, you win the court case. And if you're not, you lose it. I mean, I cannot find any other explanation. So we need to talk about Loxism, especially when we only have Hollywood's word for there was a single German who wanted to exterminate the Jews. We haven't found a single document saying that the Germans wanted to exterminate the Jews.
Yeah, okay, I'm not going to watch the whole thing, but I think you get the general idea of where this guy is, right? I mean, I wish I could fit this guy into some kind of predefined box and try to explain exactly what the purpose of what he's doing is, or what he's trying to accomplish, or sort of the logic behind it. But it doesn't really work for engagement, considering the amount of years that he has been active. His following is not that large. He has, in the elections, the Danish elections he has participated in, he won maybe like 0.3% of the vote. This is not even enough to get a single seat in parliament. I think you need at least 2% for that. So he has been an electoral political failure. As an influencer, I think his fans are quite marginal, even though it's sort of close to 40,000 on Twitter. It's not that many. I think if you consider maybe he has 5,000 supporters in Denmark. Maybe the rest of it are people who are international, who are just likely to follow this type of content. So, I mean, you have like other, say, Danish influencers like Dr. Anastasia Lupus, who's posting this kind of low IQ anti-Semitism meme stuff, and she's getting like over 1 million subscribers. Like she's crushing this guy. Like even the Norwegian sort of far right, what you consider influencer, Hans-Jørgen Lysglimt Johansen, he's not half as sophisticated as Mads Palsvig. He's just kind of a clown, but he's getting a higher vote share than this guy, but just by being a clown. So I'm not even seeing the purpose of this, other than that there's some kind of schizophrenia going on here. There's really no kind of resolution. I don't get it, to be honest. That's just kind of my final conclusion to this. Like, I'm just pointing at an insane guy, and like, that's it. That's all I found. So yeah, I think I'll just end the video here, and I hope you had fun.